I can see them all sitting around a campfire. One would tell a good one, and then the other one would try to better it.
My grandma, and my aunt, my uncle, all of them went home. Ở buổi này mà mới cái chỗ khơi ở buổi tí mà.
It's our history. You know, it's a part of who we are as a Seminole people. So language and culture are really just inseparable.
It is really important to keep up with our stories, with our legends.
The way I learned it, and probably you learned it at night in the camps with the elders telling us, you know, before we went to bed. That part of the picture is probably over.
Storytelling, it's a property of the Seminoles that needs to be looked at and taken care of.
I'd like to share with you a few stories and legends that I have enjoyed all my life. One of my favorite pastimes was to ask my grandfather, "Tell me a story about things." And I was pretty lucky he would do so. Stories are told at night. After the story or legend is told, you must give an imitation spit like this. If you do not do this, it is said that your lips will curl up and you will look ugly. So make sure you give the spit sound. I hope you enjoy my stories, just as if we were around a campfire under a chickee out in the swamp. And remember to give the spit sound.
I learned different stories as I was growing up, and then one day it was like a cultural event, and some of the storytellers couldn't come, so they asked me to kind of fill in, and I was kind of nervous, you know. I believe I was like 28 at the time. You know, I'm still young, you know, those are for like the elders. And then they kind of said, well, the young people like listen to you tell stories. And so they kind of told me, well, you need to kind of pass on the stories to the younger generation. So ever since then, about, I would say 5 years ago, that's when I started kind of doing storytelling.
Storytelling actually is an ancient form of way of communicating family to family. The Seminoles, we use storytelling to tell a point, to prove a point.
It gives us the strength, kind of like information from our elders. But years ago, generations ago, it was just passed on from verbal to another.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stories have some sort of, you know, moral or lesson, or, you know, parable or whatever you're going to call it. Not necessarily maybe just a single lesson, you know, so there's all different kinds of stories, and stories we learn at, you know, different phases and ages of our life that are particular to where we are in our journey.
The elders, like my grandmother, she said that was their schooling back then. You know, that's how they learned about history and customs.
Did you know that the dog stole the alligator's nose? A long time ago, the alligator could swim in the water and also walk on the land, and he could smell.
A lot of the animals are in our stories. A lot of the animals represent things.
There was always a character that was funny, entertaining. He always got into trouble, and that's the Jofi Laksha, the rabbit.
How many have heard of the great race between the tortoise and the hare? Well, we call it the box turtle versus the rabbit. The rabbit in our stories, he's a trickster. He's always up to no good. You know, he causes chaos in a world. He lies, he steals. And we have him in our stories to teach our kids how not to be and what not to do.
I live kind of back in the woods, so I have a lot of animals and birds and squirrels running around in my yard. And sometimes I just hear it, and I hear a bird, and I tell my kids, I said, this one was telling you that you're having visitors. And so when you hear this bird, you go put your pot of coffee on the campfire or sofki. So it seems like animals played a big part in our stories and our way of life.
Do you have a favorite character?
I don't know. Probably the rabbit, I guess.
Chihantamo, I am Hidamgihajing, one who flies high in the sky. It was my great-great-grandfather's name. He was of the Bird clan, and many years later, it was handed to me by my grandfather.
James Billy, he been telling stories ever since I was little. He would make songs out of them, and he always made it funny, climactic. And if he did a character, he would go into that character, like this is what the rabbit would sound like, this is what the bear sound like. So he was always animated when he told me.
The Creator had made all kind of things, and he finished it up, and he kind of rubbed his hand and says, oh, everything I've done looks good. He had all kind of animals and butterflies and water and mountain. He even put the stars up in the sky. He thought to himself, my goodness, there should be somebody look like me around here. So he reached down, made a mold out of the clay, and he created man.
Legends and stories have been told throughout the Indian country, and each tribe has their own type of story pertaining to their country. How the possum lost his tail, how the fox became to be the color he is, even the raccoon, how it got the banded stripes on its eyes. How these animals bragged about who can last the longest without drinking water, and she will tell you which ones survive. Some of the other stories that I particularly like is how each animal got its name. Like Wakachobe, the big one that goes walk, walk. And right away, that's the great blue heron. And Betty Mae Jumper knows a lot of these stories, and she's going to share them with you, so I hope you will enjoy them.
Betty Mae collected a lot of stories that was not hers, and she went to different villages and talked to them about different stories, and they would tell her and she would collect them. She made a book, and a lot of the people that gave her stories was kind of upset with her about the book, but it survived, you know.
Possum is vain, but sometimes curiosity.
Betty Mae Jumper, when she told stories, she told it from a traditional way, and then that's who kind of mostly told it in Miccosukee, and then she told it in English.
This story is about a rattlesnake and a rabbit.
Now the rabbit, he's hopping along a path one day, and he comes upon a group of box turtles. And he starts to look at those box turtles, and he begins to laugh.
Each storyteller has their own way of telling his stories, but they learn it from their elders.
Ollie learned pretty much from his Aunt Carol, and then he learned from all the different other elders, such as James too.
Each time you get a story, it's different from each storyteller. So when a storyteller like myself is ready to tell a story, usually it's a combination of different stories, and because it's how they want to tell the stories, and they make it their own.
Now watch this, ready? Did you see it? Did you see it?
Ollie made it to the different step, and then he made laughs, gestures, and then he kind of incorporated modern times with storytelling. Like he would say, you know, like Carl Lewis was just like the rabbit, you know, and he was just like, you know, stomp your feet, you know, and that's what I like, more interaction with the storytelling.
This is how the box turtles beat the rabbit. And like I said, this story was told to me by Carol Cypress. She said this was how the Seminoles were able to survive in the Everglades. Everybody worked together. Nobody went without. If there was food, you know, everybody got some, and nobody went hungry. And this is how we survived the Seminole Wars.
Ali Chicksha, Ali Chicksha, Ali Chicksha.
Paul Buster would kind of tell a story softly. So when he would tell a story, it made you feel comfortable. And then he kind of made you feel like you were like hearing a story for the first time when you were a little kid. Like no matter how old you were always hearing that story. Like you felt like you were a kid again.
I'm trying to encourage you to learn our language. Well, let me tell you a story. I guess I'll have to try to tell it to you in that broken English, foreign language, what we call English. I'd like to tell it 99% in Ilapungi, but then at the same time, children that are this young has no idea what I'm saying. So I kind of like to apply a little bit of it into English so that they can learn it as well.
Yeah, I think today, I've come to realize how much a priority our languages are to our tribe. Being that there's probably only around 50 speakers of the Creek language in our tribe anymore.
Happy Jones is a great storyteller in our community, and she tells it all in our language, the Creek language, and that's a lot of the novelty of it is that we're missing because nobody speaks the language anymore.
It can be a finite resource, having that really special opportunity to hear something that hear anywhere else in the entire world.
We're heading over to the Brighton Reservation, which is about a 2-hour drive, and we're actually seeing my aunt, Happy Jones, and I haven't really heard her tell stories since I was little. Hopefully I might be able to hear those words I haven't heard in a long time.
A lot of times I'm transporting Happy or Shula somewhere, and they'll just break out in a song and start telling me stuff, and I'm thinking, man, I wish I had a tape recorder or something, but they're always willing to share things with you.
I don't know what I'm going to say, but if the Lord help me out, I'm going to tell you what my story, what I got. Oh, I shall the mission. What's the other mission, God? Nekta manas kusin, nekta ratimai, dom nisvitskin, ja madovitsivuus uskotuitska. Unagin, zakkan, unahit, unavigaret, ja vidayu kunagat. Hiilis, unaissinnivuitskat.
I had a lot to think about Happy Jones's presentation, and it was a lot to take in. There's a lot I got to learn about my own language, but like hearing her tell the stories, I mean, that's what made it interesting.
Mau po ginas uanai now po di rononga.
The way I learned it, and probably you learned it at night in the camps with the elders telling us, before we went to bed, that part of the picture is probably over.
They're getting the worst of the weather right now as the eye approaches here.
This just in, we've got some tornado warnings for western Polk County and Florida.
I'm going to have my cameraman show you the power of the wind there behind me. This might be a gust of about 90 miles an hour, maybe 100.
And there was at one point where a huge hurricane hit us a few years ago. It knocked everybody's electricity, their TV, their microwaves, their stoves.
Around the southernmost point.
Everybody was kind of going nuts, everybody was going crazy. And the Seminole people, along with Miccosukee people, we kind of just went back to our traditional ways. We just kind of left our houses and went back to our chickies, and people kind of just got all their meats and their supplies and water, and we kind of just shared with one another. And they put a fire, and people just started talking. And then people started talking. They're like, "Oh, I wonder what's happening in Miami. I wonder what's happening there." But then to get one of the elders kind of said, you shouldn't be thinking about that. You need to get your mind off of that. So what we started doing, we just started going back telling stories. With the hurricane hitting us, there's no television, there's no movies, there's no video games to distract us. It just went back to storytelling. It was kind of like good medicine, because it made us feel good. It made us forget about what was going around us. And not only that it made us remember who we are, but it made us feel good inside and made us kind of just keep everything going. And I think that's why storytelling is really important, because they always kind of said it makes you supposed to remember who you are, but that day it made me remember that, or made me feel good. So to me, I think storytelling is always good medicine.
It's our history. I've never liked to really call them legends. I like to call them our stories. Just because the word legends, it's got like that connotation of it's not true, but that history and those lessons, and it's a part of who we are as a Seminole people.
Working with the kids for a long time in the education department, that was the part they would remember. They always remembered legends. And then you tell them legend next week, "Oh, tell us this legend again." They love hearing it, especially the little one. I don't think it's very hard to learn some of the legends and pass it on to the kids.
It is really important to keep up with our stories, with our legends, so that our children can learn them and apply it into their lives, because it has good morals to it.
Storytelling, it's a property of the Seminoles that needs to be looked at and taken care of.
How do you feel when you tell a story?
It was good. I like that.